the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical, Majid Nawaz. And today's topic, as is on your screens now, it is explaining MAGA for Mamdani. That is explaining the MAGA for Mamdani phenomenon that has arisen since that now very widely known meeting that took place between Zohran Mamdani, the newly elected Mayor of New York, and President Trump at the White House, which is where this photograph is indeed from. And so what we're going to do is, over the course of this stream, provide you with a full breakdown and analysis as to exactly what's going on with that relationship between Trump and Mamdani and why the two of them appeared so well acquainted and got on so well together. So that's really what we aim to do. You can see the title hopefully on your screens now as we share the screen with you there, explaining MAGA for Mamdani. That is the topic today. And we'll begin with the news as reported all over the press. Here, just to blow it up for you on your screens, you can see it reported in The Guardian, and that is MAGA world heads left spinning by Trump's warm welcome for Mamdani. That's in The Guardian, reported on the 24th of November. Now, that's a bit of an inverse of the actual scenario, and that is that it's not just the supporters of President Trump, known as MAGA or Make America Great Again, that are left wondering how the hell that meeting, in particular, the cordiality of it, managed to transpire. The cordiality of it, again, represented there by that image, which pretty much does sum up how the meeting went. You can see both of them looking very happy and satisfied with each other. And that image is a fair summary of how the meeting in the White House went between the newly elected mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, and President Trump. So The Guardian is, in its headline, laying all of the surprise on one end of the political spectrum, claiming in its headline, as it has done there on your screens, you can see it, that it's the MAGA world whose heads have been left spinning. The truth is that's not necessarily the case. It's actually ideologues on both, in this instance, the left and the right, on both ends of the political spectrum. The ideologues have been left with their heads scratching, but actually, truthfully, beyond ideologues, extremists on all ends of the political spectrum have been left wondering how on earth that meeting happened and how it transpired so well. And we find here on Radical Media, we find that is a fantastic result. And we're going to explain to you why. So let's first begin by reading from that Guardian article. And it says a flurry of social media posts from MAGA influencers have laid bare the disorientation felt by members of Trump's base at the spectacle of Friday's cordial Oval Office meeting with Mamdani, who the president previously painted as a communist lunatic. Wild to allow a jihadist communist to stand behind the president's desk in the Oval Office. Sad to see, wrote far-right activist Laura Loomer, one of Trump's most fervent online backers. Well, let's begin with this point, and that is it's important to understand that if Laura Loomer is opposing something President Trump is doing, and if it's a showdown between online paid agitator or let's just say online agitator come influencer Laura Loomer and President Trump, then the safest bet would be to side with the perspective of President Trump before siding with Laura Loomer's perspective. And you wouldn't even necessarily need to know what the issue or the dispute involves. Generally, Laura Loomer online is on the more hyperbolic end of online rhetoric, usually seeking to sow division and discord between America's Muslims and America's Jews. Now, she's not the only one that does that with her online rhetoric. Of course, there's others on the Muslim end who seek to sow discord similarly between America's Muslims and America's Jews. But in the case of MAGA supporters, Laura Loomer happens to be one of the most prominent of them. And so The Guardian, focusing their headline, as they have done, on Laura Loomer and using her as a case study for why MAGA have had their head spinning or have had left their head spinning by this meeting, is a bit shabby, to be honest, by The Guardian, because they clearly don't understand really what MAGA is, who Laura Loomer is, and what's going on with Trump and Zohran Mamdani. Because, of course, it isn't only MAGA, or in this case, Laura Loomer, as The Guardian has reported, who have been left scratching their heads. As we said at the top of the stream, it's ideologues of all spectrums, and beyond that, extremists of all spectrums. And really, it's because, of course, Zohran Mamdani himself, through this meeting, has been forced to compromise on much of his ideological stances vis-a-vis Trump. And the compromise and the conversation between the two did and will continue to focus on issues that they agree upon. And we're going to explain those issues that they agree upon as primarily being issues around, one, the cost of living crisis in New York, and two, perma war abroad, whether that be in Gaza with Israel and Netanyahu and Hamas, or whether it be in Ukraine between Russia and Zelensky. The perma war agenda and stopping it is something that Trump and Zohran Mamdani can agree upon and will cooperate upon. And the cost of living crisis domestically within America is another area that they agree upon. And in fact, those two topics are connected. It's the perma war abroad that is bleeding the money out of our domestic economies, our meaning not just America in this case, but even the UK here. It's the support for perma war abroad that is leaving us so economically deprived at home. So we can stop funding all those, in many instances, illegal wars abroad, and in other instances, arrogant and egotistical, profit-driven wars abroad. If we can stop backing all those wars, we'll have more money to spend at home. And we're going to go through in this stream exactly how those are the two very issues that MAGA and the Mamdani phenomenon can unite on, and have indeed united on, and explicitly said so in their White House meeting. And the meeting itself forced a compromise, and the compromise that it forced looks a bit like this. If you see on your screens right now, we'll blow it up for you and play for you exactly what Mamdani had said prior to meeting with Trump and after, and once the invitation from Trump came along. Take a look at this.
My administration would be Donald Trump's worst nightmare. I have many disagreements with the president, and I believe that we should be relentless and pursue all avenues and all meetings that could make our city affordable for every single New Yorker. I intend to make it clear to President Trump that I will work with him on any agenda that benefits New Yorkers.
Now, what you just heard there is pretty much the template for how things then went forward. Mamdani campaigning on the very strong ideological premise that he did, that Trump is a fascist, Trump is literally Hitler, defund the police, pay for free everything. The platform that he campaigned upon, you're going to begin to see over the course of this stream, that he's very significantly moderated from since before and after, in fact, that meeting with Trump in the White House. It's why our immediate reaction to that particular meeting was, as you see on your screens now, come to Papa, young man. And this is it's a come to Papa moment for Mamdani. And again, we'll explain exactly why and how. And let's begin with this. Mamdani's campaigned on the premise that Trump was a fascist. And what we've written here is, come on, this was our response on the 21st of November. Come on, truthfully. It's not very fascist for Trump to give permission to Mamdani to call him a fascist, is it? And we'll play you that video, and you can make of it what you will, but clearly Trump giving Mamdani permission to call him a fascist in the White House that he currently occupies isn't very fascist of President Trump. Take a look at this.
Asked about your comment calling views. Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about.
That's okay. You can just say
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
And Mr. President, I wanted to ask you also. He asked about your comment.
You see, the last time I checked, but somebody who has all the power giving permission to somebody who, compared to him, by virtue of the fact of not being commander in chief, has no power compared to Trump, doesn't control the armed forces, doesn't have his finger on the nuclear buttons, compared to the president, has very little levers of power. And yet here is the president, the occupant of the White House, while he's his guest in the White House, saying, it's okay, I understand, you can call me a fascist. Not very fascist of Trump, in fact, to do so. And we put it to you, this is one of the reasons why it isn't just the ideologues on the right that have been surprised somewhat by Mamdani's meeting with Trump, but also the ideologues on the left. How do they square that circle that Trump gave permission to Mamdani to call him a fascist? As we say, to square that circle, you're faced with one of two choices. Either Trump is not really a fascist, and he's quite liberal in his free speech rights that he granted to Mamdani, or indeed the definition of fascism is no longer as authoritarian as we were led to believe. And clearly, it's the former. Clearly, Trump is, rather than change the definition of fascism, perhaps we should consider the fact that Trump may not necessarily be a fascist. Really, what we find with this meeting is that MAGA has, and MAGA pragmatism indeed, has blunted some of the ideological views of Mamdani, some of his ideological position, if you like, and the way in which he campaigned. And before we get to those 2 points of commonality, and that is the cost of living crisis in New York, as well as the end of the perma wars abroad, it is important to remember that differences will still remain between these two. And we're going to show you some memes that really do highlight and focus on where those differences, where they exist, will remain. And clearly, one of them, which should be on your screens right about now, is on the role of government. So we'll expand this for you and you can all see. There is no doubt that MAGA and the Mamdani phenomenon in New York still disagree on the meaning of what is represented here in this meme. You can see here an image of Trump saying, I want to shrink the size of government, and a blue-haired, one presumes New York-based protester saying no kings. That's a reference to the no kings protests that were organized by Democrats against Trump. And then at the bottom, an image of Mamdani saying government should be involved in every part of your life. And the same blue-haired, presumably New York-based protester saying, I'm sold. And really that meme highlights a large area of disagreement, despite those two areas of agreement that they're going to cooperate on. The large area of disagreement between the populist left and the populist right still will obviously be on the size and role of government. And that's a legitimate, genuine disagreement between left and right, and should be acceptable to people. Would we all not rather live in a country that has a sincere and genuine left-wing phenomenon and a sincere and genuine right-wing phenomenon, who, without compromising their own views as to the size of government, talk to each other? And when I say sincere, what I mean by that is not pretend right-wingers who pretend to put their country first, but instead put the interests of other countries and their foreign wars first, or indeed pretend left-wingers who pretend to care for human rights and anti-war sentiments while supporting perma war and invasion of countries abroad. So, of course, a more genuine left-wing, right-wing disagreement would be in everyone's interest. So it's not too much of a problem that there is one genuine disagreement between the two. Here is another one. This one perhaps, again, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, Mamdani did campaign on this, and so it isn't too cheeky to claim that he wants to give free stuff, even though he's backed away from most of those pledges now. But you can see here in this second meme, somebody asking a classroom who wants free stuff, and everybody, including the person asking the question, puts their hand up. And then the second image at the bottom, who wants to pay for other people's free stuff? And nobody, including the person asking the question, puts their hand up. Again, this meme demonstrates, again, a genuine disagreement between the left and right. Again, it's around the size of the state. Mamdani did promise in his election campaign to provide free groceries, free buses, and all manner of free stuff. And the challenge always remains how to pay for that. And that's a genuine economic dispute between what in economics, what are called classicalists and Keynesians. And that dispute shouldn't be, we shouldn't aspire to end such policy disputes. We often say that unity in politics is fascism and unity in religion is theocracy. We don't want unity in politics. We don't want unity in religious doctrine. Unity in political doctrine is fascism, and unity in religious doctrine is theocracy. The more pluralism and open debate, discussion, and disagreement we have in theological matters and in political disputes, the healthier society is, because the more tolerant by definition it is with disagreement. And usually when you have a tolerance for disagreement and a respect for evidence-based rational conversation, then the view that has the most merit eventually gets heard. So we shouldn't be too concerned that they disagree with each other on those topics. But the real issue and our immediate reaction to this is summarized on your screens as follows, and we'll blow it up for you and read it once it's on your screens there in large. There it is. What we've said, the real victory here between this MAGA and Mamdani meeting is as follows. Trump is not ideological. Compromise and pragmatism are part of his, quote, art of the deal. By exposing that, in the end, the ideologue Mamdani will choose pragmatism over ideology. Trump exposed not Mamdani necessarily, but the far left ideology he espouses. If you truly understand what's going on culturally, then you'd understand that that is a win. Trump holds all the cards. And that view there that we've just read to you really summarizes the view we take from this MAGA Mamdani meeting at the White House, and that is the power dynamics are clearly in Trump's favor, and yet Trump used those power dynamics to frame the conversation as one of benevolence and cooperation on the good, and as one of tolerance, including allowing Mamdani to call him a fascist to his face in the White House, in front of him, in his own office, in front of the nation and the world. So the fact that Trump was able to frame that meeting, despite the power dynamics being in his favor, as one of benevolence, compromise, and cooperation, and an expansive tolerance towards some of the juvenile and infantile political sloganeering of Mamdani, such as considering Trump a fascist, which he obviously isn't by virtue of the fact that he gave Mamdani permission to call him a fascist in the White House. We view that the overall winner here is pragmatism and cooperation. In other words, the country came first. America came first in that meeting, and that was largely because of the framing that Trump allowed for the meeting. We say Trump allowed that framing because Trump was the one that held the power in that meeting. It could have gone a very different way. Just remember how it went with Zelensky, when Zelensky turned up at the White House without a suit and without any gratitude for Trump's attempts to resolve the Ukraine conflict, which we're going to come to in a moment. And remember the berating that everybody, including J.D. Vance, no MAGA stalwart, we remind you, but rather a Peter Thiel acolyte and a big tech bro stooge, who Peter Thiel funded all the way to the White House in order to facilitate his own desires for a technocracy. That J.D. Vance even backed Trump when they were reprimanding Zelensky in the White House. So when the power dynamics are in the way that they are there with Trump as president, it could have gone in a very different direction. Mamdani is no Zelensky. He doesn't control a country. He doesn't control an army like Zelensky does. And yet Zelensky's the one that was berated by Trump, and Mamdani was wooed. So what's going on here, as we've stated, is that the pragmatism demonstrated by Trump, the expansive, cooperative nature, shows that truly the winner here through the pragmatism is the country where it can cooperate on the good, such as the cost of living crisis and ending wars abroad. The country wins. That's truly an America first approach to the MAGA Mamdani situation. No matter what Laura Loomer tells you online, the America first approach is to cooperate on the good for what's good for your country. And that's the benevolence that Trump was able to show in the White House. And those that don't get it, even despite the evidence being clear to them, did push back against us when we initially made this point on the day that the meeting happened. We're going to show you that pushback and our responses to it now. So somebody online calling themselves A Fair Word said as follows: pragmatism and compromise is when you concede or make deals with a counterpart. A mayor and a president have to deal with each other. That's not a discovery. Meeting Trump doesn't mean surrendering ideology for pragmatism. Did anyone tell us Mamdani is never going to talk to him? And our response to that was quite blunt. Don't be obtuse, as you can see on your screens now. That user responded, don't be naive. And we pushed back again. That's a non sequitur. In other words, nothing to do with anything there. You are being obtuse. Either Mamdani is collaborating with a fascist or he's moderated his ideological stance about considering Trump a fascist. It's not that complicated. And that's the key point there. All right. Either Mamdani is collaborating with a fascist or he's moderated his ideological stance about considering Trump a fascist. It's not that complicated. And of course, that point wasn't responded to by the user, because what are you going to say there? Either a fascist isn't what you on the progressive left have always led us to believe that it is. You know, Hitler is so evil you don't cooperate or collaborate with him, and death to collaborators. Or indeed, Trump isn't a fascist. You can't have it both ways. If Trump's a fascist, then Mamdani is a fascist collaborator. If Trump's not a fascist, then there's room to talk. Personally, if you worked with Hitler on building the Autobahn, despite how good his motorways were, you're a collaborator with a fascist, in this case, of the Nazi variety. So there isn't any way around that, really, for the progressive left, especially considering they're the ones that like such black and white labels, calling people fascists and Nazis. Then you will be hung or hanged by your own petard. And so the point there is clear. Mamdani has compromised, and Mamdani himself has made it clear that he's compromised. But this is not to say such a compromise is a bad thing. Of course, it's a good thing, and he's explained why he's compromised, while obviously reserving for himself the right to call him a fascist, because Trump's given him permission to do so, right? So while reserving that right to call himself a fascist, Mamdani explains why he's willing to collaborate with a fascist, and it's cooperation on the good. So you're going to see that on your screens now. Take a look at this.
Would be the ones to do so.
In that press conference with President Trump, a reporter asked you whether you believe that President Trump is in fact a fascist, a word that you've used in the past. You were about to answer, then President Trump sort of jumped in and he said, quote, "That's okay, you can just say yes. It's easier than explaining it." So, Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
so you do.
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And I think what I appreciated about the conversation that I had with the president was that we were not shy about the places of disagreement, about the politics that has brought us to this moment. And we also wanted to focus on what it could look like to deliver on a shared analysis of an affordability crisis for New Yorkers.
You've also said in the past that President Trump has engaged in a, quote, attack on our democracy. You've called him a despot. Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
Everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe. And that's the thing that I think is important in our politics, is that we don't shy away from where we have disagreements, but we understand what it is that brings us to that table. Because I'm not coming into the Oval Office to make a point or make a stand. I'm coming in there to deliver for New Yorkers. And a few weeks ago, I was asked by a reporter 3 words to describe myself. I said, New York City. And that's what animated that conversation. How do we deliver for the people of New York City?
I think that some of your supporters would be curious to know. You say you stand by your past statements that, yes, he's a threat to the democracy. How do you square working with someone who you still think is a threat to the democracy?
I think working for the people of New York City demands that you work with everyone and anyone. and that you always look to find those areas of agreement while not overlooking the places of disagreement. And I think this was something that came up in our meeting. We spoke about immigration. We spoke about the fact that in New York City, we have sanctuary city policies that allow for the city to work with the federal government on around 170 serious crimes. The concern for so many New Yorkers comes about anything beyond that. And I spoke about the importance of us being able to protect New Yorkers, and some of the incidents that we see, they do not do that.
You raised.
Now, see, what's been made clear there by Mamdani is, despite, you can safely ignore the fact that he says he stands by his views that Trump is both a fascist and an enemy to democracy, because obviously if he actually believed that, he wouldn't be collaborating with a fascist and an enemy to democracy. He obviously doesn't believe that. He obviously needs to keep saying it because he got elected on that basis, and he's obviously a bold-faced liar. But then all politicians are, because they'll look at your camera lens and tell you they think Trump's a fascist, but would not admit if you ask them, so you're a collaborator with a fascist. Of course he's not going to say that, even though he's just told you he's going to collaborate with him. And so what's really going on here is he's keeping his base on board, on side, because he knows that some of the electorate he's got to keep on board in New York are genuinely that batshit crazy that they think the president is the reincarnation of Hitler. Or indeed Mussolini. And he's got to keep them on board, while at the same time he knows full well that 1 in 10 voters in New York who voted for him voted for Trump. And that statistic is what's going to really help us understand the rest of this stream, which is those areas they're working on together or will cooperate on, the cost of living crisis and stopping wars abroad, is because they understand that overlap as best represented in the statistic that they themselves acknowledged in the White House. We'll show you the video of it in a second, that 1 in 10 voters who voted Mamdani voted MAGA. And, your mainstream corporate media genuinely should have honed in on that statistic, and they didn't. Rather, they chose, such as The Guardian, to spin it as MAGA head spinning, MAGA don't understand, MAGA have been cornered, and look, they're outraged. And then they use Laura Loomer as their example. Anyone who knows anything understands that Laura Loomer doesn't speak for MAGA, but of course, The Guardian would do that, wouldn't they? So really, forget the fact that they stand by, Trump allowed Mamdani to stand by certain ridiculous pejoratives in describing him, because even the Times of London has recognized that that's all theater. They're actually going to be cooperating on the cost of living crisis and on stopping perma war abroad. And we're going to show you that now. Here is a headline from the Times that should be on your screens about now. It says, "Why MAGA for Mamdani is the future of American politics," dated 24th of November. That's this month. And it explains in the subheading, "President Trump and Zohran Mamdani's bromance proves a right-left populist movement isn't just possible, it is the answer to the country's crisis." Of course, this is an opinion column in the Times, but it's incredibly insightful to understand. And even the person who wrote this column says, and we'll expand this on your screen now, because he makes the same point we've just made to you all about the fact that you can ignore the fact that Mamdani keeps calling Trump a fascist. You can see here. But it was clear from the meeting that neither of them really felt this way, despite the political rhetoric. If Mamdani really thought Trump is Hitler, there was no way he would ever meet him. If Trump really thought Mamdani was the Stalin of New York, he would not have told the press he'd feel fine living in the city under his leadership. And then we've written underneath there, why? Because both MAGA and Mamdani agree on the cost of living crisis and peace in the Middle East. And we'll show you the clips on both of those issues in a minute. But that's a quote there from the column in the Times of London. Why MAGA for Mamdani is the future of American politics. Even they are beginning to recognize that, as we here on radical media have been saying for a very long time, it's at least if you go back to the Joe Rogan episode number 1780, it's in there for you. That episode explains everything that's happened up until now. This is no longer a left versus right phenomenon. What we're looking at is an up versus down phenomenon. It's the haves versus the have-nots. The haves, who are the globalists' elite in power, the globalist cabal, those haves are siphoning off all of our hard-earned money. They are fleecing us dry, as they did during COVID, They are transferring wealth from the people through their financial system to their coffers offshore in order that they can fund technocracy and wars abroad, because wars abroad provide the testing ground for the technocracy, and they provide the pretext for an ever expanding national security state. You need war to expand the national security state, and it's through the national security state nexus that you bring in technocracy. That's the globalists. That's what they want to achieve. This isn't about left and right. It's about up versus down, or more appropriately, down versus up. And that's why Mamdani and MAGA are able to agree on cooperating to end the cost of living crisis and end wars abroad. Where will they get the money from to fix the cost of living crisis? From the billions and trillions that wars cost. That money can be redirected to home, back into our cities, and back to our people that deserve it. In other words, us who work and pay taxes and still get fleeced. And for our effort, get told to get locked down in our homes, take medically experimental injections because the state happens to tell us to, while they continue to fleece us of all our money. And of course, inflation is out of control because of the lockdowns and the money they printed to sustain those lockdowns by giving us furloughs, literally giving every single citizen money to stay at home during the lockdown. That's what's caused our problem. It's their policies, and those policies, ending them, is what Mamdani and Trump can and have and are agreed upon. And so really what we're saying is, let's get to the first issue. It's that the Mamdani is no threat to MAGA, and MAGA is no threat to Mamdani. In fact, 1 in 10 New York voters who voted for Mamdani also voted MAGA. Remember that statistic. It's very important, and it helps you to understand what's going on here, because they agree on ending the cost of living crisis domestically and on ending the permanent wars abroad, because it's to fund those wars that all of our money is being fleeced domestically, and it's why our cities and towns are in total decay. And so Mamdani and MAGA, Trump, are part of the solution to that problem. Let's begin with the cost of living crisis and just demonstrate that again from the meeting in their own words. And remember what we said. On the 12th of November, we explained when Mamdani was first elected that Mamdani was funded by Soros. We've got the Radical Media, the Radical Dispatch from the 12th of November, 2025. That's on your screens now. And it's headlined, Zohar Mamdani is an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset. Now, in that article, we explained something that we had said months ago. We're going to expand that onto your screen so we can read the text for you, and so you can all see what we're referring to. And we've said there, Zohran Mamdani's election will be used by globalists to amplify identitarian divisions and civil strife in order to provide the pretext they require to maintain their divide and conquer strategies for war, technocratic surveillance, and dominance. Right? So if you keep that line in mind, you begin to understand why the likes of Laura Loomer are so opposed to Mamdani and insist that he's a jihadist. They want to keep the identitarian element of this alive, whereas MAGA, Trump, has chosen to focus on the areas of common good as opposed to focusing on the division. Focus on what we share rather than how we are different. And that was the approach taken by Trump. The globalists will seek to find the differences so they can continue the divide and conquer approach. And we want to quote another post by another social media user, Zainab Rabua, who's really, we feel, summarized and understood Trump's approach to this situation. And this is on your screens now. And we feel this is a nice way of explaining what Trump just managed to achieve there. This is hilarious, says Zainab Rabua. So typical. Trump loves humiliation rituals. He sets the stage, builds pressure around the person, and then watches how they handle it. This is exactly what happened here. Mamdani was put in front of hostile journalists while Trump reminded him who controlled the room. Mamdani may be politically opposed to Trump, but he was not running against him. So Trump did not treat him as a challenger. When Trump does not see someone as a very direct rival, he frames the whole exchange as cooperation under his authority. And that is precisely what happened. Trump framed this meeting as cooperation under his authority. That could only have been done by Trump because Trump's the president. Mamdani isn't. There's no way a president can be under the authority of a mayor of a city. And so the framing was always going to benefit Trump. It was his home turf. It was in the White House under his auspices. And that's why you found Mamdani saying things, reconciliatory things, such as the fact that 1 in 10 voters in New York that voted for him also voted for Trump. Take a look at this. It should be on your screens now, and we'll just play it for you.
Mr. Mamdani, does New York City love President Trump? New York City loves a future that is affordable. And I can tell you that there were more New Yorkers who voted for President Trump in the most recent presidential election because of that focus on cost of living. And I'm looking forward to working together to deliver on that affordability agenda.
I got a lot of votes. One more. Go ahead. One or two more.
Now, you may have caught that first question that was posed to Mamdani. Does New York City love Trump? Again, remember, he cannot be and shouldn't be expected to suddenly become MAGA when he goes to the White House, right? That would also probably defeat the purpose of this cooperation, right? So what he says instead is very telling. He doesn't say, yes, New York City loves Trump. He says New York City loves jobs, loves solving the cost of living crisis. Then he says, but 1 in 10 voted for Trump. And then he says, and we're going to cooperate on doing this. And that's the point we're making to you. Again, listen to it one more time, and you'll see exactly what we're saying, that they're going to work together on solving the cost of living crisis by ending wars abroad. Take a listen to this.
Mr. Mamdani, does New York City love President Trump? New York City loves a future that is affordable. And I can tell you that there were more New Yorkers who voted for President Trump in the most recent presidential election because of that focus on cost of living. And I'm looking forward to working together to deliver on that affordability agenda.
I got a lot of votes. One more. Go ahead. One or two more.
So you saw that there, and both very clear. Trump is actually very popular in New York, considering New York is meant to be a liberal city. Trump remains very popular in New York, and Mamdani knows that. So just as he can't isolate the Antifa crowd, who are also quite strong in New York, the crowd, the type that believe that everything should be free, that the police should be defunded, that food should be given out in grocery stores, all subsidized by the state, that Trump is a fascist Hitler, Nazi reincarnated. That crowd has to be appeased, and Mamdani appeases them by maintaining his use of hyperbolic language while signaling to everybody else that genuinely cares about policies such as the cost of living, which is why Trump's popular, that he will cooperate with Trump on such policies. And we were literally explicitly told that there by the two of them. And again, the Times has realized this, and this is again from the Times on today's Times of London on the 24th of November, as it is, making this part very clear. And we just put that on your screens now for you all to see. As our regulars know, we come with all the receipts for people to go and understand these things themselves. So on your screens now should be a segment from the Times headlined, "Why MAGA for Mamdani is the Future of American Politics." Today's Times, and there's the quote for you that we want to read. So we're going to expand that just so you can all see it as well. And here we go. In fact, Mamdani pointed out that 1 in 10 voters who backed him also voted for Trump. "I'm okay with that," Trump said. "They took turns patting each other's backs, and for a moment, our country felt unified. Some were downright angry. The hard right political activist, Laura Loomer, tweeted, 'So are we just going to normalize communism?' So again, ignore Laura Loomer. We've already explained why, and we've done so many times in the past as well. The point here is you can see that really they're going to cooperate, and they've made it very clear because those issues overlap. The 1 in 10 who voted for Mamdani and also voted for Trump genuinely care about two things: the cost of living crisis and stopping wars abroad in order to fund domestic cost of living. And here is Mamdani explaining the voters that voted for Trump in video form as well. So we've read it to you from the Times of London. Now we'll show you the video. Take a look at this.
A lot of my voters actually voted for him, and I'm okay with that.
And one more time, just so you can see it again.
A lot of my voters actually voted for him, and I'm okay with that.
And you heard it there for yourselves. Trump saying a lot of my voters voted for him, Mamdani. Mamdani then responds 1 in 10. And then Trump says, I'm okay with that. It's very clear what's going on. They're going to consolidate that support base and cooperate together on fixing the cost of living crisis in New York. And of course, Trump is from New York. And so what we'll do is read an extract from the Times here that attempts again to explain what is really going on. That's from that same Times article, Why MAGA for Mamdani is the Future of American Politics. And we'll blow it up on your screen and read it for you. And you'll see that they've taken the same view, that this is an attempt to push back against the divide and conquer approach by focusing on identitarianism and division and difference. And instead, by focusing on what we share and what we have in common, these two factions will start working together. So from the Times today, a column in the Times explaining the MAGA Mamdani phenomenon here. We'll read it for you. So what is really going on here? The friendly meeting didn't surprise me one bit. That's the columnist. Because the future of our politics is not left v right. It's populism versus the establishment. That phrase there, what we explained in Rogan, in our Rogan interview, episode 1780, it's up versus down. The columnist is saying it's populism versus the establishment. But yeah, we're not going to pick on language here. The Trump and Mamdani represent two sides of the same coin, says the columnist in the Times. Neither the establishment on the left or the right offer solutions to the pain Americans are facing. From Missouri to New York, young people feel they never have families or buy a home. Jobs have been shipped overseas, and an ever-increasing underclass has been priced out of a middle-class life. The Kamala Harris and Lindsey Graham types in our country barely recognize this truth, nor have they offered any tangible solutions. In fact, while Trump and Mamdani were chumming it up in the White House, old guard establishment figures like Harris, the Bush family, and Rachel Maddow were at Dick Cheney's funeral, an apt metaphor for the political reality of the future. During the Oval Office meeting, Trump astutely observed that Bernie Sanders and I agreed on much more than people thought. Many of the Bernie Sanders supporters voted for me. He's right, says the columnist. But after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the squad came along, many of Sanders' original populist stances got lost in a wave of abolish ICE and defund the police rhetoric. It's no wonder he did well in the states where Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. And subsequently, many of his voters have ended up voting for Trump. Now, you can see there what's happened. It is that the old Bernie Sanders voters, who have always cared more about the cost of living crisis than they did about supporting wars abroad, they have felt betrayed. They are voters who are prepared to swing depending on who promises to solve their cost of living crisis. These are generally unemployed but highly educated young men, unmarried because they don't have the means, don't have a home, frustrated with life. And they they used to be called the Bernie Bros. They went for Bernie Sanders, then they voted Trump. And now those in New York went back to Zohran Mamdani, because really what they care about isn't left or right. It's fixing the cost of living crisis. And who can blame them, folks? And so you can see there what's happened. And keep in mind that the invention of the AOC and the squad was specifically brought about to undermine that Bernie Sanders phenomenon by moving it towards the more culturally hyperbolic end of progressive politics, defund the police, peaceful riots, and all of that malarkey that many of you, we're sure, will remember. That was an attempt to subvert the Sanders phenomenon, but the Mamdani phenomenon has pulled back from that brink and brought it back in line to focus on the actual policies that matter, not defunding the police, not peaceful riots, but on the actual stuff that matters, cost of living and stopping the wars abroad. That's what's happened. And again, we go back to the Times on that article, why the MAGA for Mamdani phenomenon is the future of American politics, to again quote to you from that. Because you'll see how it is consistent with what we're saying. On your screens now from today's Times, why MAGA for Mamdani is the future of American politics. And there's the extract. We're going to blow that up on your screens and read it for you. With regards to the Sanders phenomenon, the Bernie Sanders phenomenon going MAGA. Sanders' story shows why it's important for the left to moderate on cultural issues, especially if they want to build a populist movement that can win nationally like Trump. And though it's hard for many to understand, two such opposing factions can appeal to the same voters. Just look at this guy, a 55-year-old two-time Trump voter in New York, dressed in MAGA for Mamdani gear, who reportedly also voted for the mayor-elect. This will be the first time I'm voting for a Democrat, he said. I like his policies. And here he is. You can see the image. It should be big on your screens now. That's a two-time Trump voter wearing a MAGA for Mamdani t-shirt, a red Trump hat that says MAGA for Mamdani. And really, that's the phenomenon that we've been talking about. Trump voters, in this case, in that image, a two-time Trump voter voting for Mamdani because he said, I like his policies. He's talking about the cost of living crisis and ending the wars abroad. And it's really something that has now crossed over. Even the New York Times has begun realizing that the progressive left can only win if they de-emphasize the culture wars issues, the identitarianism, the anti-white rhetoric, and focus instead on the policies that matter. Being anti-white isn't and cannot really be a policy, but solving the economic crisis is. And so here you have established left-wing commentators such as James Carville in the New York Times. Out with the woke, in with the rage is a column that should be on your screens about now. And we'll blow it up for you so you can see it. We'll read an extract from it as well. But really the point being he's saying is that the woke needs to make way for anger in around the cost of living crisis. That's on your screens now. James Carville, New York Times, out with the woke, in with the rage. A quote from the article dated 24th of November. It is time for the Democrats to embrace a sweeping, aggressive, unvarnished, unapologetic, and altogether unmistakable platform of pure economic rage. This is our only way out of the abyss. Now, keep in mind, when he says pure economic rage, the headline is very clear. Out with the woke, in with the rage. What he's saying is ditch the culture wars and focus on the economics. And that, again, to demonstrate, is where Mamdani and Trump will cooperate. They will cooperate on the economics of fixing New York. And not just New York, of course. If Trump ends all the wars, then he fixes it everywhere in America as well. So again, back to, that was the New York Times, back to the Times of London, again, reflecting on that point, they are in agreement. And so you can, on your screens about now, you should be able to see an extract from the Times of London. So that last extract from the New York Times, back in here with the Times of London, and it makes it very clear. We'll blow that up on your screens as well so you can see it. And then we'll read it for you. So that should be on your screens now. That's from today's Times of London. Carville, referring to the New York Times article we just showed you, Carville points out that this can only be accomplished if the left moderates itself on cultural issues. In the Oval Office, Mamdani did just that. He was quick to assert that he'd keep the New York Police Department headcount where it stands at 35,000 officers. He also went from demanding we abolish ICE to agreeing that local police officers would work with ICE on the deportations of illegal immigrants who were found to have committed any of the 170 crimes the NYPD deems serious. This language is a massive departure from typical progressive rhetoric about immigration. And Mamdani said his vision for tax reform wasn't about taxing white people more, but about taxing higher income households of all races. So you can see on those issues there, very clear on the whole defund the police, blocking ICE deportations, and on taxing white people. Mamdani compromised on all of that, back down, and in the White House made it very clear that he's distancing himself from the culture war issues to focus specifically on reviving New York economically, which again can only be done when we end all the wars abroad. But you get the point that the left, the progressive left, have realized that the way they win elections is by focusing on the economic issues, not on the culture wars. Now, another interesting thing to keep in mind here, though, with this MAGA Mamdani meeting, is that the populist right also have some areas that they would be wiser to abandon. And you can see the damage in these elections that it has caused them. So go back to the Times of London, and in the same column we've been reading from, and the relevant section will be on your screens now that we'll read for you again. But it's not just the left that needs to tone down its rhetoric. Populism continues to be a rising force on the right, especially in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. The hard-right streamer Nick Fuentes, who has a history of making wildly transgressive comments about women, Jewish people, and minorities, has built his own extreme version of identity politics among his internet-based movement, the Groypers. Just as the left cannot build a populist coalition with national appeal by demonizing white people, the right will never build a large identitarian movement that excludes non-whites, Jewish people, and women. So likewise, it would behoove the populist right in this cooperation, instead of pursuing the divide and conquer policies that globalists seek to pursue in order to continue causing friction within our societies, to create the pretext for more security states and more technocracy and more spyware and more authoritarianism, as using riots as a pretext to clamp down even more. Instead of focusing on the divisions, by focusing on what unites us, the populist right themselves would face less damage in the ballot box as well. And there is an indication that Trump understands this, because we'll take you now to a video where isn't just Mamdani moderating many of his policies, though not his language. Here you see Trump making it very clear that he doesn't consider Mamdani a jihadist. And again, that is an instance of Trump not moderating his policies, but signaling to MAGA not to listen to the likes of Laura Loomer, who, as we just read for you earlier in the stream, does consider Mamdani a jihadist. So take a listen to this.
You think you're standing next to a jihadist right now in the Oval Office?
No, I don't, but I don't particularly. I think I met with a man who's a very rational person. I met with a man who really wants to see New York be great again. And I can say again, because New York was great. I think he can bring it back. Now the question is, will he bring it back all the way? Will he bring it back greater than ever before? Which is, I guarantee, that's his wish. I think he wants to make it greater than ever before. And if he can, we'll be out there cheering. I'll be cheering for him.
So again, they're very clear that Trump does not consider Mamdani a jihadist, and chose again to take the route of reconciliation rather than division. And many on the troublemaking end of the populist right will take offense and umbrage at that statement. Laura Loomer, we read to you earlier there, calling Mamdani a jihadist communist. He's neither a communist nor a jihadist. He's just somebody that uses populist left-wing rhetoric to get into power. He was always a Soros asset, as we explained to you when he won the election. And it's very clear that Trump understands that the way to contain a Soros asset running New York is to cooperate on the good and not exacerbate the divisions, because it's the divisions that the globalists seek, so that they can use them as a pretext, and as we warned many months ago, as a pretext to increase the authoritarian national security state, to bring in their technocratic surveillance state. So it's only by not focusing on those divisions that you undermine that agenda. And that's what Trump just did there. And there are some indications that if MAGA doesn't understand this point, that they will suffer in the ballot box. And that's what we're going to show you now. This is from a different article in the London Times. It is entitled, from the 5th of November, headlined, Why Democratic Victories Tell Us About Democratic Victories Tell Us About America's Feelings on Trump. And the key extracts we want to read for you, we'll bring up on your screens now. The first is the introduction to the article. A stunning night for the Democrats on Tuesday has lifted the party out of the doldrums, but left activists to argue over whether their success points to a moderate or a radical future. Here is a key point. Perhaps the main bellwether results with lessons for the next year's midterm elections and beyond were the two Democratic tribes that had been leaning towards the Republicans, right? But went instead to the Democrats. Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer, and especially Mickey Sherrill, an ex-Navy pilot in New Jersey, exceeded expectations on the night. The first alarm bell was sounded by independent voters. Spanberger won them by 19 points and Sherrill by 13 points. These are the pool of motivated swing voters crucial for winning the House of Representatives, the lower house of Congress, next year. Now, the key point to take away from that, very clearly in terms of other results that came in on the night is that the independents that we earlier mentioned, many of them Bernie bros, for example, former Bernie bros, Sanders, the independents that swing votes this way or that in this election swung back towards the Democrats after having been for MAGA. And part of the reason that can explain that is something we're going to come to. It's partly clear that the cost of living not being solved is really what drives many of these voters. But another demographic, as well as the independent voters that went back to Democrat from MAGA, were the Latino voters. And the reasons for that one are actually very clear. So again, back to the Times of London from the 5th of November, what Democratic victories tell us about America's feelings on Trump. And the second category after independent voters are the Latino voters. And we'll read for you. That should be on your screens now. Just expand it so you can see what we're reading. The next flashing signal is Hispanic voters, with whom Trump scored highly last year. Republicans hemorrhaged support in the most heavily Latino parts of Virginia and New Jersey on Tuesday. Hudson and Passaic counties in New Jersey, where more than 2 in 5 voters are Latino, swung by 22 and 18 points respectively to the Democrats compared with last year's presidential election. That's a huge swing, by the way, folks. 22 and 18 points respectively, a swing from MAGA to the Democrats. Why? It goes on to explain. And you can see from the bold here, this suggests that Latinos who lent their ballots to Trump due to the cost of living concerns last year will punish the Republicans at next year's midterms if their economic situation has not improved. The swings also suggest Trump's aggressive immigration crackdown could backfire electorally. He has sent masked immigration and customs enforcement agents into Hispanic communities to arrest people in their workplaces. A poll for Unidos US, the largest Latino civil rights organization in the country this week, found that 64% of Latinos disapprove of the job Trump is doing. Trump unglued the Hispanic vote from the Democrats, but it now appears unmoored and liable to swing dramatically in response to immediate concerns. But the main wake-up call for Republicans was sounded by the word of the night: affordability. So those two areas, cost of living crisis and the ICE raids against those who are the migrants that are being deported, are responsible for swinging the Latinos massively, 22% back to the Democrats after they had voted for Trump at protest against Biden. Now, the key thing here is that, of course, the fact that Trump was able to unplug those Latino voters from the Democrats is a historic achievement in itself. But to stop the hemorrhaging back to the Democrats, MAGA would be wise to realize that, of course, some of the more extreme ends of their policies, not deporting foreign criminals, perhaps, because even Mamdani in New York has now promised NYPD cooperation on that front, but especially the way in which it's done. Masked ICE agents in plain clothes going into broad daylight into largely migrant areas and snatching people off the street and putting them into unmarked vans. There are people around Trump who are seeking to undermine his authority. And of course, this is one of the best ways you can do it. And it's beginning to show in the ballot box. So that's something that should always be a matter of concern. And again, reading from the Times on the reasons why even the MAGA base would do well to moderate on some of its more extreme Luma type stances. And of course, clearly Luma isn't always MAGA, and we've just made that clear in this stream. But again, to read from that same Times article that's on your screens now, Times of London, what Democratic victories tell us about America's feelings on Trump, 5th of November. And we'll blow this one up again so you can see the text as we read it. There you go. The other huge factor is Trump, who, as usual, found reasons for a poor night other than himself and his failure to conquer inflation, which is running at the same 3% rate he inherited. He blamed the government shutdown, despite previously insisting that Democrats were paying a heavy price for it. This may backfire on him if they sense an advantage in keeping the record closure going. It was left to J.D. Vance, the vice president, to diagnose the real policy problem. He delicately suggested that Trump had taken his eye off the ball in his pursuit of the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this line is really important. The fact that J.D. Vance has come out and said Trump's distracted because he's seeking the Nobel Peace Prize and he should be more focused at home. Understand something. J.D. Vance is Peter Thiel's guy. He's owned by the technocrats. He was only sent to power by the technocrats in a compromise that Trump made with them to get them out of his hair because Trump needed to deal with the Democrats. For J.D. Vance to undermine Trump and say he's too busy focusing on getting the Nobel Peace Prize, in other words, that's code for he's too busy in foreign policy. What they're really saying isn't, and we care about solving the cost of living crisis, because these are the same guys, the technocrats, and remember, J.D. Vance is entirely owned by Peter Thiel, the technocrat. These are the same guys that want to destroy the domestic jobs market with their automated AI, social credit score system, tokenized society. So they don't really care about the domestic economic situation. And Vance is owned by Peter Thiel. Vance, by saying that Trump is too busy seeking the Nobel Peace Prize, what he's really saying is Trump's stopping all the wars abroad, and we, technocrats, don't want him to do that. That's the code there that you should understand. And that's why we warn against J.D. Vance as being the successor to MAGA and Trump after Trump's time in office, because he's owned by Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and all of these tech bros are not America first. They're globalist technocrats. Now, this brings us nicely to the last part that Trump and Mamdani agree on, and that is ending the wars abroad. And Trump is rightfully focused on stopping all these wars and deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for it, because by stopping all those wars, he's able to bring the money back home. And he knows this, and Mamdani knows that too. So you can see here, reported by an Arab English language newspaper, The National. It says, it should be on your screens now, and we'll show you the video clip that accompanies it too. But it says, in an Oval Office meeting, President Donald Trump said both he and Mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, want to see peace in the Middle East. And really, this clip here is the crux of everything we've been saying to you as to why MAGA for Mamdani and the cooperation exists. We'll expand it on the screen for you and you can watch it for yourselves. This really does summarize our stream for you today.
Now, for the first time, peace in the Middle East after 3,000 years. And now we're going to refine it. And I think you're going to see some very positive things happen.
And is the potential to invite the Lebanese president?
Oh, sure. Oh, I would do that. Absolutely. And if the mayor would like to be here for that meeting, because I know he feels very strongly. I think you feel very, very strongly about peace in the Middle East.
We desperately want it, and that's something that I shared with the president, that when I spoke to New Yorkers who had voted for the president last November on Hillside Avenue and Fordham Road, I asked them why. I heard again and again two major reasons. One was that they wanted an end to forever wars. They wanted an end to the taxpayer dollars we had funding violations of human rights, and they wanted to address the cost of living crisis. And I appreciated the chance to discuss both of those things.
He said a lot of my voters actually voted for him, and I'm okay with that. I'll do that. I'll sign it. Give it to me. I'll sign it in a minute. That's pretty good.
Now, that's worth listening to again, because it's so clear in summarizing what we have been arguing is going on here. We're going to play it for you one more time, just so you can listen to it again.
Now, for the first time, peace in the Middle East after 3,000 years. And now we're going to refine it. And I think you're going to see some very positive things happen.
And is the potential to invite the Lebanese president?
Oh, sure. Oh, I would do that. Absolutely. And if the mayor would like to be here for that meeting, because I know he feels very strongly. I think you feel very, very strongly about peace in the Middle East.
We desperately want it, and that's something that I shared with the president, that when I spoke to New Yorkers who had voted for the president last November on Hillside Avenue and Fordham Road, I asked them why. I heard again and again two major reasons. One was that they wanted an end to forever wars. They wanted an end to the taxpayer dollars we had funding violations of human rights, and they wanted to address the cost of living crisis. And I appreciated the chance to discuss both of those things.
He said a lot of my voters actually voted for him, and I'm okay with that. I'll do that. I'll sign it. Give it to me.
Explicit there. an end to the foreign wars, and to solve the cost of living crisis. That is the basis for the MAGA for Mamdani phenomenon. It's the basis on which Mamdani will be contained by MAGA, the president, of course, having more power than the mayor of New York, and is the basis for the cooperation that would unfold between the two. And really, it is on that note that we end our stream today. That is what's going on. It explains the MAGA for Mamdani phenomenon. It explains what they're going to cooperate on and why they're cooperating. By cooperating, they sidestep the divide and conquer policy of the globalists who seek perma war, and it cannot have perma war without division and conquer. Without division and conquest. And so by sidestepping the globalist agenda, instead cooperating on the good, an end to the foreign wars, and to solve the cost of living crisis, they've been able to forge a basis for the future. And it is by doing so, by sidestepping the globalist agenda, by sidestepping the divide and conquer agenda, by sidestepping the perma war agenda, because remember, you cannot have perma war without division and conquest. The divide and conquer agenda serves that perma war agenda. By sidestepping all of that, and by focusing on the good, on what they can cooperate on, solve the economic hardship of the people, to fix the cost of living crisis and get the money for that from stopping the foreign wars abroad, they've demonstrated by doing those two things that they're putting their country first, not their ideological differences first. And that's the real way to detect whether a left-wing or a right-wing politician is sincere. Not what they say about each other, not what they necessarily, their left-wing or right-wing respective positions are, but whether they themselves genuinely believe that their positions are for the sake of making the country a better place. Because if they do, and if they're campaigning in politics to try and make the country a better place, you will start witnessing them cooperating where needed on making the country a better place. And that's the kind of cooperation that we believe we are seeing. And on that note, that's all we've got time for today's live Warrior Creed live stream. You've been listening to the radical Majid Nawaz. We ask all of our subscribers on Radical Media to go to majidnawaz.substack.com and become premium paying subscribers. We cannot do this work without your support. But either way, the audio and video podcast version of this stream will be available for our paying subscribers on Radical Media, as will the written version of this stream with all the receipts attached for you in the weekly Radical Dispatch. Until next week, you've been listening to the Radical Majid Nawaz, and we leave you with a slightly different outro this time today, and you'll understand why when we play it.